Hello all and welcome to week two. Week two, we're going to talk about the Civil War and the Reconstruction Amendments. So the first lecture is about the Civil War and the first two Reconstruction Amendments. And this week we're going to talk about the three main amendments that were passed after the Civil War. We're going to talk about what new civil rights were guaranteed to what people. And we're going to talk about whether everyone was happy with the outcome of the Civil War amendments. Okay, so as I've mentioned before, because our class is very focused on the civil rights, we're not going to get a chance to talk about every topic in American history. So, be sure that you check out maybe some sources on the Civil War. Lincoln said from the beginning of his campaign that his plan was not for immediate abolition of slavery. His plan actually featured gradual abolition. So kind of the way Lincoln saw things was if we did not allow slavery to expand into the West, then the country would outgrow slavery through a gradual abolition. So he never intended to free slaves during his presidency. That was not the way he felt was best for our country at the time. So when he was elected and the Confederacy seceded, his original goal was to get the South to come back to the Union. And just a little snippet of a letter, Horace Greeley was actually criticizing Lincoln for his lack of emancipation. And in this letter, this is a quote from Lincoln that really emphasizes his goal, which is not to end slavery, but to maintain the Union. In the letter, he says, "I would save the Union. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. And if I could save the Union by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because it helps save this Union." So we know because of the outcome of the Civil War that Lincoln is actually seen often as a great emancipator, but that's not really his original goal. And in fact, many people cite the Emancipation Proclamation as freeing the slaves. It actually has little impact on slavery, especially in the immediate sense. Instead, what it does is it frees slaves in the Confederacy, and that's really important for a couple different reasons. First of all, clearly, Lincoln has no real power in the Confederacy to free the slaves, and really, it was. Second of all, it was really aimed to be military. In that he was hoping it would shake the power of the Confederacy more than actually seeing it free slaves. There are some historians who've argued that Lincoln's policy becomes more progressive and more towards freedom for African Americans towards the end of the war. He's assassinated April 15th of 1865. So it's really hard for us to say what Reconstruction would have looked like under Abraham Lincoln. So I'm going to move on to discuss the first two of the Reconstruction Amendments. The first, of course, being the 13th Amendment. It's ratified in December 6th of 1865. And really, its overall goal is to free the slaves. So Section 1 is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2 is Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. And part of what that's giving Congress the power to do is to make legislation that might have been needed to free the slaves. So that, that may seem real self-explanatory, but clearly Congress needed the power to make laws that would help newly freed slaves. Okay, so then the 14th Amendment, which is ratified July 9th of 1868. The 14th Amendment is about citizenship. So We're going to start with Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce a law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizen of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So clearly there are other sections, but this is probably one of the most important parts of the 14th Amendment, and probably the one that is most often legislated and most often talked about. So that's a really important clause, the equal protection of the law. And that's what a lot of civil rights legislation that comes down the road will be based on. And even other legislations, the 14th Amendment has been extended often by the Supreme Court to protect corporations and other legal matters. They have been considered citizens, and therefore they are also provided equal protection under the law. So that's a clause that we'll be referring back to as we look at other cases like Brown versus the Board of Education, which said that segregated education was not providing them with equal protection under the law. Section 2 is representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of the persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed, but when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for the President and Vice President of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of the state, or the members of the legislative therefore, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such states being 21 years of age and as citizens of the United States or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crimes, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. So as you can see from me trying to read that is quite a mouthful. But basically part of what that's addressing is, if you go back and we look at the Constitution, it's referring to the 3/5 clause in our Constitution, the compromise between slave states and free states when writing the Constitution. Slave states wanted slaves counted as whole people when it came to representation, but counted as not people property when it came to counting for tax purposes. And what the 3/5 clause is it compromises and it counts a slave as 3/5 a person when we're counting both for representation and for tax purposes. And this section of the 14th Amendment, basically what it's saying is they'll be counted as whole people from now on. And once again, I know some of this may seem like obvious, but when you're talking about the Constitution, you have to be very careful. And as you know, with legal things, you have to be very careful and make sure we enumerate things very clearly. So Section 3, no person shall be a senator or representative in the Congress or elector of the President and Vice President or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such a disability. So clearly that is one part of the amendment that addresses the Civil War very directly. And the goal is to stop people, especially people who are higher up in the Confederacy, from being able to, in the future, hold position in the American government. So there was a lot of debate after the Civil War. Lincoln had been assassinated, and Andrew Johnson, the vice president at the time, took the presidency, and he and the radical Republicans of the Congress did not necessarily agree on how to approach Reconstruction. He was looking to be very lenient with former Confederate officers and people who had held position in the Confederate government, whereas the radical Republicans were maybe looking to see some punishment doled out and not to let especially people who had been slave owners immediately take back their power in the South and the government. So what that did was it meant that Johnson could not just give presidential pardons and kind of absorb them of all of their participation in the Confederacy. And instead, it required them to have a 2/3 vote from the Congress in order to really to regain citizenship and the full rights of citizenship. So Section 4, the validity of public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in the aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave. But all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. And you know, what Section 4 is addressing is clearly the Confederacy was running a war, and they issued bonds, and they incurred debt, both to Southern citizens and, you know, maybe to others. And basically, the United States is declaring very clearly, first of all, that they will not take on any debts of the Confederacy, and that those war bonds and all of those things cannot be held to the United States government, even though these Southern states are going to be admitted back into the Union. And it's also making it very clear that Southerners cannot claim loss of property because of the freedom and emancipation of the slaves. That these debts are all illegal and void. And then Section 5 is that Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation and the provisions of this article. So again, it's important to understand that the last section is giving Congress the power to do the things they need to do to legislate this amendment into effect. Okay, so these are the first two amendments, the 13th and the 14th Amendment, and, you know, just to sum them up kind of clearly, the 13th Amendment freed the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free slaves. It freed slaves in the Confederacy, which Lincoln did not have the power to free them. So while the Emancipation Proclamation spoke to the morality and spoke to rousing people at the time, and maybe even a moment where Lincoln really wanted to move forward and change his war goals, in the end, Lincoln wanted to preserve the Union, and that was his main goal. So it's not until the 13th Amendment that we really see freeing of the slaves. And I don't want to make it sound like Lincoln didn't support the 13th Amendment, because he did, but we just need to understand that that's actually ratified after he's gone. So it's really up to the radical Republicans to kind of continue to carry out this idea. And then the 14th Amendment provides citizenship for newly freed slaves. And one of the most important aspects of it is equal protection, which will have far-reaching changes. We will talk about the 14th Amendment and equal protection. You'll read about it in articles on the civil rights. It really becomes an important piece of future arguments about civil rights, and really whether what we're saying is equal protection under the law. And we're going to look at a lot of things that infringe upon that idea later in our class, like Jim Crow laws and black codes, Plessy versus Ferguson. These things did not provide equal protection under the law. So those changes will be far-reaching. Thanks, guys. Let's look at my last slide here. Is on my references. Mostly it focuses on the amendments this week, but the little snippet I read you from the Abraham Lincoln letter about the Emancipation Proclamation and Horace Greeley. There's a great article that I would totally advise you guys give a chance, go read, and it really gives you a look into Abraham Lincoln that many people don't know about, that, you know, he was not always the great emancipator. So, thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed my lecture. Have a great day.